A newborn giraffe stands within hours of birth. A foal walks within minutes. A human infant cannot lift its own head for 2 months. It cannot roll over by itself for 4. It cannot sit upright without support for 6. It cannot walk for 14 months. For the first several years of its life, a human child is perhaps the most helpless primate on Earth, not less helpless than other mammals, but helpless in a way that is dramatically, almost shockingly different from every other creature its mother shares territory with. An elephant calf walks within hours. A baby chimpanzee clings to its mother with grip strength that surprises veterinarians. A human baby grips nothing. A human baby cannot survive 1 day without adult intervention. This is not a defect of development. This is the foundation of the human species. The evolutionary explanation is ancient and deeply specific. Humans traded physical development for neural development in a way that fundamentally altered the species' entire life trajectory. A giraffe is born large because growth must be rapid, predation is constant, and the herd moves without pause for stragglers. An elephant's pregnancy lasts 22 months, so the calf can develop sophisticated neurology in utero and emerge capable of walking. Social recognition and complex communication. But the human fetus, growing a brain that demands 30% of the body's energy despite comprising only 2% of body weight, must be born earlier in development or the mother's metabolic systems collapse entirely. The anthropological record shows that the human brain more than tripled in size over 4 million years of evolution. But it did so under a constraint. The pelvic opening that allowed bipedalism could not expand beyond a certain point without making walking prohibitively difficult for females. The evolutionary solution was both elegant and catastrophic. Humans are born unfinished. The pregnancy ends not when the child is ready to survive independently, but when the mother's body can no longer sustain the metabolic demands of fetal brain development. The human infant is ejected into the world at a stage of development that would be considered tragic in any other mammal half-formed. Unable to thermoregulate effectively, incapable of moving toward food or away from danger, dependent absolutely on the adult caregiver for every single need, including the ability to eliminate waste without assistance. This was the price paid for a brain large enough to support language, abstract reasoning, and the kind of cognitive sophistication that would eventually enable civilization. This created a new evolutionary reality. An extended childhood. Humans require 15 to 20 years of dependency. Most mammals require months. Some birds require weeks. The human species required someone, usually the mother, but also fathers, grandmothers, and entire communities to remain committed to a dependent who contributed nothing and could not contribute anything for a decade or more. This requirement created the possibility of culture, of knowledge transfer, of the accumulation of learning across generations. It created the basis of civilization. It also created a psychological imprint that no amount of later independence can fully erase. The invisible architecture of human financial psychology begins in the womb and crystallizes in early childhood. Humans are hardwired to be dependent. For 15 to 20 years, the developing human is in a state of near-total reliance on authority figures. Your parents decide what you eat. They decide when you sleep and for how long. They decide what you learn, what you wear, what you are allowed to want. More critically, they decide the shape of your reality. A parent tells you that a particular food is dangerous, and your brain learns to associate that food with threat. A parent tells you that money is for security, and your developing prefrontal cortex, which is not fully developed until the early 20s, internalizes that frame as objective truth. Your brain develops under conditions of near total powerlessness, not in the way a slave is powerless, which creates different trauma patterns, but in the way a child is powerless. You are helpless because you are biologically incapable of independence. Your brain cannot survive the neurological demands of modern life without the guidance and protection of authority. Your survival depends on trusting that the authorities who control your life know what they are doing and are acting in your best interest. This is the cruelest aspect of human development. Evolution selected for absolute faith in authority because absolute faith in authority is necessary for survival during the extended period of human childhood. You cannot develop trust selectively in childhood. You cannot trust your mother's decisions about nutrition, but distrust her decisions about safety or emotional regulation. The brain does not have that precision during development. You trust completely, or you die. Your cortisol levels spike if you are separated from the caregiver. Your heart rate elevates when the authority figure is displeased. Your dopamine floods when the authority figure is pleased. Every neural system you possess is wired to respond to authority with obedience. There is no third option. There is no capacity for independent judgment. The system understands this. It has always understood this. Every major institution, religious institutions, educational institutions, governmental institutions, financial institutions is designed around the principle of exploiting and reinforcing this evolved dependency. You are trained from birth to believe that there are authorities who know more than you, who have your best interests at heart, and who should be trusted with your most important decisions. The church is the authority on salvation. The school is the authority on knowledge. The government is the authority on law. The bank is the authority on money. The problem emerges when you reach adulthood and this dependency programming remains active. A 28-year-old is biologically an adult, but her brain still carries the operating system installed during 15 years of dependency. The neural pathways that fire when an authority figure speaks were carved when she had no choice but to comply. An accountant tells her she needs tax-advantaged strategies. A financial advisor tells her she needs diversification. A social media influencer tells her she needs to start investing early. The same authority response mechanism that kept her alive as a helpless infant fires. She nods. She complies. She does not ask the questions that would require her to assert that her judgment might be equal to the authorities. This is not stupidity. This is not weakness. This is the inevitable result of spending 15 years in an environment where your judgment was not equal to the authorities, where compliance was the correct response, where independent decision-making was dangerous. The neural pathways carved during that period do not disappear when you hit 18 and gain legal independence. They remain potent and automatic, ready to activate whenever an authority figure presents themselves. Consider the documented mechanics of financial decision-making. A 2016 study by Cialdini on authority bias found that when a financial advisor recommended an investment strategy, participants were 89% more likely to adopt it than when the same strategy was presented by a peer or found through independent research. The strategy was identical in every meaningful way. The source changed the outcome dramatically and predictably. The explanation. The title financial advisor activated the same authority response system that kept you alive as a dependent child. Your brain heard authority and defaulted to compliance because defaulting to compliance was how you survived childhood. The conscious mind experienced the decision as rational evaluation. The neural mechanisms executing the decision were ancient and automatic. But there is something deeper and more disturbing. The system has learned to make authority invisible. When you were a child, authority was embodied and visible. Your parent was a person you could see and speak to. The authority was transparent in its source. But modern financial systems have distributed authority across institutions, algorithms, and abstractions. You do not receive advice from a person you can evaluate. You receive it from a recommendation engine that appears neutral. You do not make decisions based on a banker's face and tone. You make them based on an app's interface. You do not feel the weight of authority because you cannot see the authority. It is there distributed across thousands of individual decisions, diffused through institutional structures, abstracted into algorithms but invisible to the conscious mind, even as it triggers the ancient neural pathways carved during your dependent childhood. A 2019 analysis by behavioral economists at Stanford examined investment behavior during market volatility. They found that investors who received financial recommendations in text format, text message, email, notification were 3.2 times more likely to follow them than investors who received the same recommendations in a face-to-face meeting where they could observe the advisor's confidence level. Facial expressions, eye contact, and tone of voice. The abstraction paradoxically increased compliance. The removal of the human advisor's visible presence, which one might expect to reduce authority-based compliance, actually strengthened it. Why? Because the invisible authority triggers the childhood authority response system without allowing the adult mind to evaluate the authority figure's actual expertise or alignment with your interests. The system had learned to exploit the dependency pathway precisely by making itself invisible. The cruel joke of evolution is that it created a species whose survival depended on learning to trust authority deeply enough that the lessons never fully erase. But also created conditions, modern abstracted institutions, where that deepened trust is pathological rather than adaptive. Your infant brain learned to trust authority because you would die without that trust. Your adult brain continues to trust authority because the neural pathways carved during those years do not fully unwrite. And the modern financial system is designed to hijack that trust at scale. Pause. But the turn is sharper than this. The real destruction is not that the system exploits your evolved tendency to trust authority. That alone would be manageable. You could simply become aware of the bias and correct for it. The real destruction is that the system has designed itself to replace your independent judgment rather than to enhance it. The system does not want you to be a better decision maker. It wants you to stop making decisions. Consider the architecture of modern financial life. Every system is designed to make you dependent. A brokerage app that shows you real-time data makes you feel like you are making an informed decision. But real-time data is noise designed to trigger panic-based decision-making. A financial advisor that provides personalized recommendations makes you feel like you are getting tailored guidance. But the recommendations are generated from algorithms designed to increase trading volume. A retirement account with automatic enrollment makes you feel like you are taking control of your financial future. But the default allocations are designed to be suboptimal enough that you feel you need to pay someone to optimize them. Each system is designed to create a sense of choice while narrowing the space of actual choices. Each system is designed to create a sense of control while increasing your dependence on the system itself. This is the same mechanism that kept you dependent as a child. But now it is not your parents narrowing your choices for your safety. It is the institution narrowing your choices for its profit. The uncomfortable truth that emerges. Every financial institution is fundamentally parent substitute. It presents itself as the authority that will keep you safe. It asks you to trust its judgment over your own. It promises that if you follow its advice, you will be taken care of. It creates dependency that persists even when you have become capable of independence. And it does this by activating the exact same neural pathways that kept you alive when you were biologically helpless. Your financial helplessness as an adult is not an accident. It is a feature. The system depends on your continued dependency. If you became truly independent, if you stopped trusting authority, stopped following recommendations, stopped delegating your financial decision-making to institutions and algorithms and advisors, the entire extraction apparatus would collapse. The system needs you helpless. So it has designed itself to keep you helpless even after you have become an adult capable of independence. What, then, is to be done? The leverage lies in understanding that financial independence requires something more than knowledge or strategy. It requires a fundamental psychological break with the dependency patterns installed during your entire childhood. It requires developing the capacity to trust your own judgment even when an authority figure contradicts you. It requires learning to be comfortable with the discomfort of independent decision-making after 15 years of being trained that independent decision-making was dangerous and would result in punishment. This is not simple or quick. Your brain has spent 15 years learning that authority knows better than you do. Your brain has spent the subsequent years being systematically reinforced in that belief by every financial institution, every advisor, every algorithm that presents itself as your guide. The dependency is not a choice you can simply opt out of. It is a neural pathway carved into the structure of your prefrontal cortex during critical developmental periods. Neural pathways take time to rewire, but they can be rewired. The first step is awareness. The moment you notice yourself saying, "My advisor recommends," "the app suggests," "my bank says," pause and ask, what would I recommend if I had to decide independently? Not what would be optimal by professional standards. What would I decide if the system were not there to guide me? This is where most people fail because the question creates anxiety. The authority was keeping you safe by telling you what to do. Removing the authority creates a vacuum. The gap between the authority's recommendation and your independent judgment creates discomfort because you have been trained your entire life to avoid exactly this gap. But this discomfort is where growth happens. This discomfort is the sensation of neural pathways being rewired. Financial institutions spend billions of dollars and decades of research to eliminate this discomfort, to make you feel confident enough in their guidance that you never feel the anxiety of independent choice. Your leverage lies in tolerating the anxiety. Your leverage lies in making independent financial decisions, even when they feel wrong compared to what the authorities recommend. Your leverage lies in building the capacity for independent judgment that never fully developed because you spent your critical developmental years in a state of helpless dependency. The process is unglamorous. It involves reading about financial systems yourself rather than listening to explanations. It involves making decisions that might be suboptimal by professional standards, but are yours. It involves accepting that your independent financial decision-making will sometimes produce worse results than the experts would have achieved, and learning from that failure without collapsing back into dependency. Most importantly, it involves understanding that the discomfort you feel when contradicting authority is not a signal that you are wrong. It is a signal that you are rewiring pathways that have been in place for your entire conscious life. The cruel evolutionary joke is this: humans are born dependent because they must develop complex brains capable of sophisticated reason. abstract thinking, and independent judgment. But that extended dependency period, necessary for the brain's development and maturation, also installs a dependency mechanism so powerful that it persists into adulthood and makes true independence extraordinarily difficult. Evolution selected for a species capable of sophisticated independent thought in the financial domain the capacity exists, and then arranged its development so that most individuals never exercise that capacity. The neural machinery for independent financial judgment is there. It is simply covered over by years of conditioning that prioritized obedience to authority over the development of independent evaluation. The people who break free are not smarter than the others. They are not more naturally immune to authority bias. They are simply willing to feel the discomfort of independent decision-making long enough to build new neural pathways. They are willing to override the authority response mechanism that kept them alive as helpless children and has kept them dependent as adults. They are willing to learn how to think about money without deferring to an authority figure. And critically, they are willing to accept that some of their independent decisions will be worse than the authority's recommendations. Because that is how learning happens when you are learning to trust your own judgment for the first time as an adult. Your financial helplessness began before you were born. The system that exploits that helplessness was deliberately designed by people who understood evolutionary psychology and the deep human tendency to trust authority. But the same capacity that created the dependency, your complex brain's ability to learn, adapt, rewire, and develop new capabilities is also the capacity that can undo it. The leverage lies in recognizing that you were born helpless not as a permanent condition, but as a developmental stage that was supposed to end. You were supposed to grow out of it. Most people never do because the institutions that profit from your helplessness never stop playing the role of the parent you are supposed to outgrow. They have simply made themselves invisible, so you do not notice you are still seeking authority approval for your financial decisions. But the approval seeking is there. The dependency is there. And breaking it requires nothing except the willingness to be uncomfortable while you rewire. The gap between dependency and independence is not a leap. It is a process of slowly building trust in your own judgment while the institutions work to maintain your dependence. The gap closes through repetition, through making decisions, through experiencing the consequences of your own choices without retreating into the safety of delegated decision-making. The gap closes when you understand that the authority figures in your financial life have interests that are not aligned with yours, and that your independent judgment, even when imperfect, serves you better than their optimized guidance serves the institution.